The crystalline chamber stretched upward into darkness, and Ambassador Daniel Carter felt very small standing at its center. The walls curved around him like the inside of a giant egg, and high above, on floating platforms, sat the members of the Galactic Council. Each alien species looked down at the three humans with expressions that ranged from boredom to barely concealed contempt. Daniel tried to keep his hands steady as he clutched the datapad containing Earth's formal petition. Behind him stood Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez, in her crisp military uniform, and Dr. Kevin Walsh, who kept adjusting his glasses nervously. The Virexian delegate spoke first, and his voice echoed through the chamber with a mechanical quality that made Daniel's skin crawl. The creature had 4 eyes arranged in a square pattern on his flat face, and each one blinked independently as he regarded the humans. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that seemed to shimmer under the strange lighting of the council chamber. When he spoke, his mouth barely moved, and the translation device in Daniel's ear rendered the words in flat, emotionless English. The humans wished to address the council regarding the Krell incursion into their star system. The Vrexians for eyes blinked in sequence. State your petition quickly, as we have many matters to attend to today. Daniel stepped forward and cleared his throat. His voice sounded small in the vast chamber, but he forced himself to speak clearly. Honored council members, 3 weeks ago, Krell warships entered our solar system without any warning or communication. They did not respond to our attempts at diplomatic contact. They established a military blockade around our home planet Earth, and they have begun large-scale mining operations on Mars, which is another planet in our system. We have tried everything we can think of to open dialogue with them, but they refuse to acknowledge our existence. Under the Protection of Emerging Species Act, we are formally requesting the Council's intervention to remove the Krell from our system and establish our territorial rights. A sound filled the chamber, and it took Daniel several seconds to understand what he was hearing. The aliens were laughing. The noise was nothing like human laughter. Some clicked their mandibles together in rapid staccato bursts. Others made grinding sounds deep in their throats. A few emitted high-pitched whistles that made Maya wince and touch her ear. The Helcorian representative leaned forward on her platform, and her scaled face caught the light in a way that made her look almost reptilian. She was smaller than the Virexian, but there was something in her eyes that suggested vast intelligence and even vaster age. Ambassador Carter, she said, and her voice was surprisingly gentle, despite the mocking tone. Your species has been capable of faster-than-light travel for exactly 2 of your Earth years. Before that, you were confined to your single star system. The Krell Empire has been a spacefaring civilization for over 40,000 years. They have mining rights throughout that entire sector of space. Those rights were established and recognized by this council 4,000 years before your ancestors learned to create fire. Daniel felt his face grow hot, but he kept his voice level. With all respect, honored delegate, Earth is our home world. It is where our species evolved. The Protection of Emerging Species Act clearly states that homeworlds are protected regardless of prior claims. The Vrexian interrupted him with a sharp gesture of one long-fingered hand. The Act protects primitive species in their natural habitat. Ambassador, you have starships now. You have visited other worlds. You have established colonies on your moon and on orbital stations. You are no longer a primitive species confined to your homeworld. You are simply a weak species that reached for the stars before you were ready. There is a significant difference between these two things. Maya's hand clenched into a fist at her side, and Daniel could see the muscles in her jaw working. As she fought to stay silent, Dr. Walsh stepped forward, and his academic training showed in the careful way he chose his words. Perhaps we could negotiate some form of compromise with the Krell? Earth has many unique resources that we would be willing to trade. Our biosphere is quite diverse, and we have certain rare elements that might be of interest. We could establish a trade agreement that would benefit both species. The chamber erupted in that terrible grinding laughter again, and this time it was louder and lasted longer. A crystalline being on one of the upper platforms leaned forward, and light refracted through its transparent body in rainbow patterns. When it spoke, its voice sounded like breaking glass, and the translator struggled to render it into words that made sense. What could you possibly offer that would interest the Krell or anyone else in this chamber? Your metals and minerals are common throughout the galaxy. Your technology is infantile compared to species that have had civilization for millennia. Your biological diversity is unremarkable. The Krell will take what they want from your system, as is their right, under Council law and galactic custom. You should have stayed on your planet, Ambassador Carter. You should have waited another 1,000 years before attempting to join galactic society. Now, you will learn a harsh lesson about what the universe truly is. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. Are you saying the Council will not help us? That you will simply allow the Krell to strip our solar system of resources while 7 billion human beings watch their future disappear? The Halcorian delegate made a gesture with her clawed hand that might have been a shrug. Ambassador, what happens to your species is not the Council's concern. You made the choice to develop faster-than-light travel. You made the choice to announce your presence to the galaxy. Those choices have consequences. The Krell have not violated any Council laws. They have not attacked your homeworld directly. They are simply exercising their legally established mining rights. If your species cannot defend its interests, then perhaps you were not ready for the responsibilities that come with spackleafillage. But we came here for help, Daniel said, and he hated how desperate his voice sounded. We followed all the proper procedures. We submitted our petition through the correct channels. We did everything according to Council protocol, the Vrexians for eyes. All focused on Daniel at once, and there was something cold in that gaze. Yes, you followed our procedures perfectly. You are very good at filling out forms, Ambassador. But the galaxy does not care about paperwork. It cares about power. The Krell have power. You do not. That is the only equation that matters. Your petition is denied. The sound of the gavel coming down echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Daniel stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what had just happened. They had traveled for 3 weeks to reach the Council station. They had prepared their arguments carefully. They had believed that justice and law would mean something to these ancient civilizations. And in less than 10 minutes they had been dismissed, like children asking adults to solve a playground. Dispute Maya touched his elbow gently. Sir, we should go. The walk back to their ship felt endless. The corridor was long and white and empty. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. No one spoke until they were safely inside their small diplomatic vessel and the airlock had sealed behind them. Maya slammed her fist against the wall, and Daniel saw tears of frustration in her eyes. So that's it? We came all this way, and they just laugh at us. They tell us we're on our own. Kevin removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. They did more than that. They told us exactly where humanity stands in the galactic order. At the very bottom. Lower than we ever imagined. We're not just newcomers. We're a joke to them. Daniel stood at the viewport and looked out at the massive Council station hanging in space. Thousands of ships from hundreds of species came and went from its docking ports. It represented thousands of years of civilization and cooperation. And it had just told humanity that none of that protection applied to them. He turned to face his companions, and something had changed in his expression. Maya would later describe it as the moment she saw Ambassador Daniel Carter die and someone much harder take his place. Then we climb up from the bottom. We show them that humans are not a joke. We show them what our species can do when we're threatened. And heaven help any alien that gets in our way. Because we didn't become the dominant species. On Earth, by accepting defeat, the ship pulled away from the station and began its long journey back to Earth. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued its business unconcerned about the 3 humans they had just dismissed. They would not remain unconcerned for long. Humanity had been pushed, and humanity was about to push back. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson that Earth's history could have taught them. Never back a human into a corner, unless you are prepared for what comes next. The command center buried deep beneath the Colorado mountains hummed with activity, and the massive holographic display at its center showed the solar system in painful detail. 17 red markers hung in space around Earth like a noose, slowly tightening. Each marker represented a Krell warship and General Lisa. Morgan studied them with the intensity of a chess player examining a losing position. Around her, the best military minds and scientists that humanity could gather waited for her to speak. The air smelled of coffee and stress, and the faint ozone scent of overworked computers. "Tell me you have something," Lisa said, without taking her eyes off the display. "Anything at all." Captain Jake Bennett stepped forward. ARD from the cluster of uniformed officers. He was young for his rank, but the Space Defense Force had promoted based on competence rather than age when the crisis began. "Ma'am, we have been running analysis on every sensor reading we have collected from the Krell ships. Every scan, every encounter, every piece of data our satellites have gathered. Their technology is definitely more advanced than ours, but they are not invincible. They rely very heavily on energy shields that are designed to deflect or absorb weapons fire." Lisa turned to look at him, and her expression was not encouraging. "Captain, we already know this. Our missiles explode harmlessly against their shields. Our lasers get scattered. Our plasma weapons might as well be flashlights. What exactly are you telling me that I do not already know?" A woman in a white lab coat pushed through the crowd, and Lisa recognized Dr. Nicole Price from the Advanced Weapons Division. Nicole's red hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and she had dark circles under her eyes that suggested she had not slept in days. "General, the aliens think we are primitive. That gives us exactly one advantage, and we need to use it." "What advantage would that be, Doctor?" "Unpredictability. The Krell and all the other Council species have spent thousands of years refining their technology in the same direction. Energy weapons, particle beams, plasma cannons, antimatter missiles. They have been fighting each other with variations of the same basic technology for millennia. Their shields are designed to counter those specific threats. But there is one type of weapon they apparently consider too primitive to bother defending against." Lisa felt something shift in her chest. "Go on. Kinetic weapons, General. We throw rocks at them. Very, very fast rocks." The room went silent, and someone in the back actually laughed before catching themselves. Nicole's expression did not change. She pulled up a new display showing complex mathematical equations and trajectory calculations. "Their shields are designed to disperse energy. They spread out the force of an explosion or absorb the photons from a laser. But they are not designed to stop solid mass moving at relativistic speeds. We have been building railguns on the lunar surface for the past 2 weeks. Electromagnetic accelerators that can launch tungsten penetrators at 97% of light speed." Lisa stared at the numbers on the screen. At those velocities, the impact energy would be enormous. How enormous? Each projectile would hit with approximately the same force as a 20-megaton nuclear weapon. But with no radiation signature and no energy bloom that their sensors are designed to detect, by the time their systems register the impact, it will already be too late. "You have been building these weapons without authorization?" Nicole met her gaze without flinching. Ambassador Carter sent a message before he left the Council station. He said if the Council would not help us, then we needed to help ourselves. I took that as authorization enough. The lunar manufacturing facilities have been working non-stop. We have 47 launch platforms, operational, and another 100 in construction. Admiral Paul Dixon cleared his throat from where he stood near the tactical display. "General, even if this works, we would be starting a shooting war with a species that belongs to the Galactic Council. Earth would be labeled as the aggressor. There would be consequences." Lisa looked around the room at the faces of the men and women who had sworn to defend humanity. "They are already stripping our solar system of resources. They are already treating us like we have no rights. The Council made it clear that we are on our own, so we defend ourselves with whatever means we have available." "Dr. Price, how long until your weapons are ready to fire?" 6 hours, General. We just need final targeting solutions and your authorization to begin operations." "You have my authorization. Target every Krell ship in the system. I want simultaneous strikes across all 17 vessels. Show them that humanity is not going to roll over and die quietly." 6 hours later, the first tungsten penetrator left its electromagnetic cradle on the lunar surface. It accelerated through the vacuum of space, gathering speed until it reached a velocity that turned it into a weapon of almost unimaginable power. The projectile was only 30 centimeters long and 10 centimeters wide, but at its current speed it carried more kinetic energy than most conventional bombs. It crossed the distance between Luna and its target in minutes, and there was no warning before impact. The Krell mining ship designated Harvester 7 was in the process of extracting platinum deposits from the Martian crust when its hull simply exploded inward. The tungsten penetrator punched through the outer armor like it was tissue paper, and the ship came apart in a cascade of secondary explosions. 73 Krell crew members died before their brains could even register that something was wrong. Across the solar system, similar scenes played out as humanity struck back. The railgun platforms fired in carefully coordinated volleys, and Krell warships that had seemed invincible suddenly found themselves vulnerable. Their shields flickered uselessly as solid matter traveling at near light speed tore through their hulls. Alarms shrieked on every Krell vessel, and tactical officers stared at their displays in confusion as ships simply vanished from the command network. Supreme Harvest Master Krellnock stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched 3 of his vessels disappear from tactical in the span of 2 minutes. His translator struggled to render his rage into coherent language. How are they doing this? What weapons are they using? His tactical officer's mandibles clicked together in the Krell expression of complete bewilderment. We are detecting no energy signatures before impact, Harvest Master. No missile launches, no beam weapons, nothing. The projectiles are too small and too fast for our standard sensor arrays. We only detect them after they have already penetrated the hull. These are primitives, Krellnock hissed. They should not possess weapons capable of threatening our fleet. Another ship vanished from the tactical display, and Krellnock felt something he had not experienced in his 300 years of life: fear. All vessels scatter formation immediately. Deploy every sensor drone we have. Find those launch sites and destroy them. But the moon was already rotating, and fresh railgun platforms were coming online. On Earth, Dr. Nicole Price sat in the Weapon Control Center and watched as target after target lit up on her screen. Each successful impact was marked with a green indicator, and she felt a savage satisfaction as the numbers climbed. Around her, the technicians and engineers who had built these weapons in secret worked with focused intensity. They were making history, and they all knew it. Target 12 is destroyed, one technician called out. Target 15 has suffered critical damage and is venting atmosphere. Continue firing, Nicole ordered. I want every Krell ship in this system either destroyed or running for the outer planets within the hour. General Morgan stood in the command center and watched the battle unfold on the main display. The red markers, representing Krell ships, were blinking out one by one or fleeing toward the edge of the system. Admiral Dixon stood beside her with an expression of amazed disbelief on his weathered face. They are actually retreating. The Krell are running from us. They came here thinking we were helpless, Lisa said quietly. They thought we would beg and plead and eventually just accept our fate. But humans do not give up easily, Admiral. We have been fighting for survival since we lived in caves. The Krell forgot that evolution favors the adaptable and the ruthless. They are about to learn that lesson the hard way. By the end of the day, 14 Krell ships had been destroyed, and the remaining 3 had fled beyond the orbit of Neptune. The solar system belonged to humanity again, and the message that went out to the Galactic Council was simple and direct. Earth would defend itself by any means necessary, and any species that threatened humanity would face the consequences. The galaxy had mocked their plea for help. Now the galaxy would learn to fear their response. The emergency session of the Galactic Council, convened less than 12 hours after the first Krell ship exploded, and the crystalline chamber that had once echoed with mocking laughter now buzzed with nervous energy. Species that had known nothing but peace for centuries suddenly found themselves confronting something they had not expected. Human defiance had consequences, and those consequences were spreading across their carefully ordered galaxy like cracks in ice. The Krell ambassador stood before the council and his carapace was scored with burn marks from the explosion that had nearly killed him. When his flagship came apart, his voice shook with rage as he addressed the assembled delegates. The humans have committed an act of unprovoked war against the Krell Empire. They destroyed 17 of our ships without warning and without any attempt at negotiation. Over 4,000 Krell citizens are dead. We demand immediate sanctions against Earth, and we demand military intervention by the full council. This aggression cannot be allowed to stand. The Vrexian delegates, for eyes, blinked slowly, and there was something in his expression that had not been there during the first meeting with humanity. It might have been concern, or it might have been the beginning of fear. Ambassador Carter did warn us that his species would resist our decision. We simply chose not to believe that such young creatures could pose any real threat to established powers. That was clearly an error in judgment on our part. An error, the Krell ambassador spat. You call the Destru content of our fleet an error. These primitives used kinetic weapons. They threw chunks of metal through space like savages hurling rocks. It is barbaric, and it violates every principle of civilized warfare. The Halcorian representative leaned forward on her platform, and her scaled face reflected the light and patterns that suggested deep thought. It is also remarkably effective, which is precisely the problem we now face. The humans did not follow any of the established protocols for space combat. They used weapons that our defensive systems were never designed to counter. They exploited a weakness that we did not even know existed: a holographic transmission request. Pulsed in the center of the chamber, and after several moments of heated debate, the council voted to accept it. The image that appeared was not Ambassador Daniel Carter in his diplomatic robes. Instead, the council found themselves looking at a man in military fatigues, standing in what appeared to be a command center. His face was harder than they remembered, and his eyes held no trace of the pleading desperation they had mocked weeks earlier. "Honored council members," Daniel said, and his voice carried across the chamber with steel in every word. "3 weeks ago I stood before you and begged for your help. I explained that my people were under attack and that we needed the council's intervention. You laughed at me. You told me that humanity was weak and that we should have stayed in our cave. Well, we are out of the cave now, and we are not going back in." The Vrexian delegate's voice held a warning tone that had not been there before. "You have started a war that you cannot possibly win, Ambassador. The Krell Empire has resources that dwarf your entire civilization. The Council has military forces that could reduce your planet to rubble. You are courting your own destruction." "Maybe," Daniel replied, and his expression did not change, "but we will make it expensive for anyone who tries. Every Krell ship that enters our system will be targeted and destroyed. We do not have your fancy energy shields or your particle beam weapons. What we do have is 400 years of human experience in warfare. We have spent our entire history fighting each other, and we have gotten very, very good at killing things that threaten us. The Krell found that out the hard way." The Krell ambassador slammed his appendage against his platform hard enough that the sound echoed through the chamber. "You will be destroyed for this outrage. The Council will authorize a full military response, and your species will be made an example of. No primitive race can be allowed to attack their betters without facing consequences. Then you had better bring everything you have," Daniel said calmly, "because humanity has something that you have forgotten after your thousands of years of peace. We remember what it means to fight for survival. We know what it is to face extinction and refuse to accept it. And we are very, very good at making our enemies regret underestimating us." The transmission cut out, but before the council could begin debating, another voice filled the chamber. This time it was General Lisa Morgan, and the shock of having their communications hijacked twice in one session sent ripples of alarm through the assembled delegates. The security breach alone should have been impossible, but somehow the humans had managed it. "While you have been debating what to do about us," Lisa said, and her image appeared next to where Daniel's had been, "we have been busy. Humans are quite good at multitasking when we are properly motivated." The holographic display in the center of the chamber changed to show Earth's orbit, and dozens of massive cylindrical structures hung in space around the planet. Each one bristled with railgun batteries, and sensor arrays, and their presence was undeniable proof that humanity had been preparing for this. Confrontation, since the moment the Council rejected their petition, meet humanity's orbital defense platforms, Lisa continued. Each one is capable of launching tungsten penetrators across the entire solar system. We built them in secret while your Krell friends were busy mining Mars. We also have something else that I think you should see. The image shifted again, and this time it showed a massive shipyard on the far side of the moon. 3 vessels sat in various stages of completion, and even through the holographic display, their design was clearly derived from captured Krell technology, but there were modifications that made them distinctly human. Weapon systems that no Council species would have thought to include. Armor configurations that prioritized different defensive strategies. These were not copies of alien ships. They were human warships built with stolen knowledge and human innovation. We are fast learners, Lisa said, and there was pride in her voice. And we are not above stealing good ideas when we see them. These ships will be operational in 2 months. After that, we will not just be defending our home system. We will be capable of taking the fight to anyone who threatens us. We will be expanding into the sectors around Sol, and we will establish human colonies wherever we choose. The Hellcorian. Representative scales shifted to colors that indicated alarm. You are threatening the entire Council ambassador. No, Lisa replied. We are telling you that Earth and the Sol system are off limits. Come into our space again with hostile intent, and we will show you what human warfare really looks like. When we are not holding back, we did not climb to the top of our food chain by running away from threats. We got there by eliminating anything that tried to eat us. The Krell learned that lesson. Make sure the rest of you remember it. The transmission ended and the Council chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted at each other in a dozen different languages in the translation. Systems struggled to keep up with the overlapping arguments. The Krell ambassador demanded immediate military action. The Vrexian delegate called for economic sanctions. Smaller species who had remained silent during the first meeting now voiced concerns about setting precedents and about what would happen if humanity decided to expand. Aggressively, the vote on military intervention was called and the chamber fell, silent as delegates indicated their positions. When the results appeared on the central display, the Krell ambassador let out a howl of rage and betrayal. The vote had failed. Too many council members had suddenly found themselves unwilling to test humanity's resolve or to risk their own ships against weapons they did not understand. The Halcorian representative spoke into the shocked silence that followed. The humans have demonstrated that they are willing and able to defend themselves. They have also shown a capacity for innovation that we clearly underestimated. Perhaps it would be wise to reconsider our position regarding Earth and to establish formal diplomatic relations rather than military confrontation. They destroyed our fleet, the Krell ambassador hissed. They killed thousands of our people. You invaded their home system, the Halcorian replied calmly. You refused to communicate with them. You treated them as if they had no rights. The humans responded exactly as they warned they would. We simply chose not to listen. That failure is ours, not theirs. The session ended without any resolution, and as the delegates returned to their ships, the galaxy found itself dealing with an uncomfortable new reality. Humanity was not going to disappear quietly. They were not going to accept their place at the bottom of the galactic order. They had proven that determination and innovation could overcome technological superiority. The old powers who had ruled for millennia now faced a species that refused to play by. Their rules and the implications of that were only beginning to become clear. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Sol, and the galaxy was still adjusting to the uncomfortable reality that humanity had forced upon it. The solar system had transformed from a vulnerable target into one of the most heavily defended locations in known space. Captain Jake Bennett stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned Earth defense ship Defiance and watched through the viewport as automated construction drones completed the third defensive sphere. Around the outer planets, thousands of railgun platforms now orbited at strategic points throughout the system, and each one was capable of tracking and eliminating threats across distances that would have seemed impossible before humanity entered the galactic. Stage Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the Outer Perimeter Defense Network, Lieutenant Chris Palmer said from his station at Communications. It is a Halcorian diplomatic vessel requesting permission to enter the system. They are broadcasting on all peaceful frequencies, and their weapon systems appear to be powered. Down, Jake considered this information carefully while his fingers drummed against the armrest of his command chair. Are they alone? Or do they have an escort? Scanners show only the single vessel, sir. No support ships and no military presence within sensor range. They appear to be genuinely alone and unarmed. Inform General Morgan immediately. And tell the Halcorian ship that they have permission to approach Earth, but make it clear that they will have 6 railgun platforms, tracking them for the entire journey. If they deviate from the approved flight path by even a kilometer, we will fire without warning. Understood, sir. The Halcorian. The vessel that eventually docked at the orbital station above. Earth was small and elegant in its design. The hull was decorated with patterns that human xenobiologists had learned indicated peaceful intentions in Halcorian culture. When the airlock cycled open, Ambassador Sarathel emerged, and her scales shimmered with colors that the translation guide said meant openness and honesty. E was flanked by only 2 attendants, and neither of them appeared to be armed. General Lisa Morgan met her in the diplomatic suite that had been hastily constructed on the station. 2 human Marines stood at attention on either side of the door, and their rifles were very visible. The message was clear. Humanity would accept diplomatic contact, but they would do so from a position of strength. Lisa did not offer a handshake or any other gesture of greeting. She simply stood with her arms crossed and waited for the Halcorian to speak first. Ambassador, Lisa said when the silence had stretched long enough. This is unexpected. The last time our species interacted, the Council was voting on whether to authorize military action against us. Indeed, Sarathel replied, and her translator rendered her voice in smooth English. My government has sent me to discuss matters of mutual interest. I hope we might speak privately about topics that could benefit both our peoples. Lisa dismissed the Marines with a gesture, but they only moved as far as the corridor outside. She sat down in a chair designed for human physiology and gestured for Sarathel to take the seat across from her. We are as private as we are going to get. Say what you came to say. The Halcorian settled herself carefully, and her scales shifted through several color patterns before settling on one that seemed to indicate careful consideration. The Council made an error in judgment regarding Earth. This is now acknowledged by most member species, even if they will not admit it publicly. The Krell overstepped their authority, and we failed to intervene when we should have. The consequences of these failures have been instructive for all of us. Is that an apology, Ambassador? It is an observation, General. The galaxy has been at peace for so long that we forgot what true conflict looks like. We forgot that species do not simply accept defeat when their survival is threatened. Humanity reminded us of these things quite forcefully, and I would say painfully for some. We defended our home, Lisa said flatly. That is not aggression. That is survival, no. Sarathel agreed, and her scales rippled with colors that suggested approval. It was not aggression at all. It was exactly what any species would do when pushed into a corner. Which is why I am here, General. The Council is splintering. The Krell incident exposed fractures in the power structure that have existed for centuries. Some species feel that the old powers, like the Vrexians and the Krell, have become too entrenched. Others worry that the Council no longer serves the purpose it was created for. There is talk of reform and even of breaking. A way to form new alliances. Lisa leaned back in her chair and studied the alien carefully. What exactly do you want from us, Ambassador? An alliance, Sarathel said simply. The Halcorian Republic has been watching humanity's development with great interest. You accomplished in 6 months what some species need centuries to achieve. Your capacity for adaptation is remarkable. Your willingness to think beyond established parameters and to use unconventional solutions is exactly what the galaxy needs right now. Needs for what? Change, the Halcorian replied. The current power structure is stagnant general. The Krell and the Vrexians and the other dominant species maintain their control through ancient agreements and through military superiority that has not been challenged in thousands of years. But you showed that superior force means nothing against innovative tactics and absolute determination. You proved that the old order is not as stable as everyone believed. Lisa stood and walked to the viewport, where she could look down at Earth floating peacefully below. Ambassador, my priority is keeping humanity safe. Not getting involved in galaxy politics? They are the same thing now, Sarathel said quietly. The Krell will not forget the humiliation you inflicted on them. Neither will the other species who see humanity as a threat to the established order. You need allies, General, and some of us are ready to stand with you if you are willing to stand with us in return. In exchange for what exactly? Knowledge sharing and technology exchange, cultural cooperation, and when the time comes, support in restructuring the Council into something more equitable. The galaxy needs a voice for younger species, and for those who have not forgotten how to struggle and adapt. Humanity could be that voice if you are willing. Lisa turned back to face the ambassador, and her expression was unreadable. We are not looking to rule the galaxy, Ambassador. We just want to be left alone to develop in peace. No one is asking you to rule anything, Sarathel replied, and her scales shifted to warmer colors. But you have proven that the old ways are not inevitable. You have shown that power can shift and that established orders can be challenged successfully. That matters more than you might think. There are dozens of species in the Council who are tired of being ignored or dismissed by the old powers. They would rally around a species that has proven it cannot be pushed around. And if we refuse this alliance, then you will face the future alone. The Krell are already rebuilding their fleet. They are specifically designing their new ships to counter kinetic weapons. Other species are watching and learning from your tactics. Within a year or two, your advantage will disappear. But if you have allies who can share technology and resources, then humanity continues to stay ahead of potential threats. Lisa was quiet for a long moment as she weighed the options. Finally, she nodded slowly. I will take this proposal to the Security Council and to the civilian government. But understand something, Ambassador. Humanity helps its friends, and we remember those who stand with us. But we have learned the hard way not to trust easily. You and your people will have to earn that trust through actions, not just words. Sarathal's scales brightened to colors that indicated pleasure and satisfaction. I would expect nothing less, General. Trust is something that humans do very well when it is deserved. The galaxy is about to learn that lesson, along with all the others you have been teaching. The Halcorian Republic looks forward to standing with humanity in the years to come. After the ambassador had departed, Lisa stood at the viewport for a long time watching Earth turn slowly below. She thought about how much had changed in just 6 months. Humanity had gone from begging for help to being courted for alliances. They had gone from the bottom of the galactic order to a position where old powers were nervously watching their every move. It was not the future anyone had expected, but it was the future humanity. It earned through determination and refusal to accept defeat. The galaxy had mocked their plea, and now the galaxy was learning to respect their strength. 2 years had passed since Ambassador Daniel Carter first stood before the Galactic Council and begged for help that never came. Now, he stood in the same crystalline chamber, but everything about the moment was different. The platform that held Earth's delegation was no longer on the floor where supplicants pleaded their cases. Instead, it stood level with all the other council members, and the humans who occupied it were the confidence of a species that earned its place through blood and determination. Next to the human platform sat the Halcorian Republic and the Xanathi Collective and a dozen other species that had grown tired of being marginalized by the old powers. Together they formed what was now called the Alliance for equitable governance, and their combined voice had reshaped the entire structure of galactic politics. Daniel looked across the chamber at the Krell, ambassador whose species had fought desperately to prevent humanity's elevation to full council status. The Krell had lost that fight along with much of their political influence. The Vrexians sat nearby in stony silence, and their four eyes blinked in patterns that clearly indicated displeasure. They had ruled the council for thousands of years, but their power was no longer absolute. The galaxy had changed and they were struggling to adapt to a reality they had never imagined possible. The council recognizes Ambassador Carter of Earth, the Halcorian mediator announced. Sarathal had assumed the role of council chair after the previous leadership structure had been dissolved in what historians were already calling the Great Reform. Her voice carried authority now, and even the old powers had learned to respect her. Judgments. Daniel stood and felt the weight of billions of humans watching. This moment through live feeds broadcast across Earth and its colonies. Honored members, I present the Treaty of Soul for final ratification. This treaty establishes clear boundaries for resource extraction in all inhabited star systems. Regardless of the technological development of the native species, it grants emerging civilizations protection under council law, and it creates an enforcement mechanism with real authority to prevent incidents like the one that brought humanity into conflict with the Krell Empire. The Krell ambassador rose from his platform, and his voice carried barely controlled anger. You mean the incident where your species destroyed our mining fleet without provocation? Where you murdered thousands of Krell citizens who were operating within their legal rights under existing council law? Daniel's expression remained calm, but his eyes were cold. I mean the incident where your empire invaded our home system without warning or communication? Where you refused all diplomatic contact and began stripping our planets of resources, while treating humanity as if we had no rights at all? Yes, Ambassador, we defended ourselves. We defended ourselves effectively and decisively. This treaty ensures that no species will ever have to make that choice again. The vote was called, and the chamber filled with light. Delegates indicated their positions through the holographic system. Blues for approval, reds for rejection, and yellows for abstention. When the lights cleared, the results showed overwhelming support, with only the Krell and a handful of their traditional allies voting against. Even some of the old powers had voted in favor, recognizing that the alternative was worse than accepting change. The Treaty of Soul is hereby ratified, Sarathal announced, and her scales shimmered with colors of satisfaction. This marks a new era for the Galactic Council, and for all species within it. This session is now concluded. Later that evening, the human delegation gathered in their quarters aboard the massive orbital station that housed the Council. The rooms were larger now and better appointed than the cramped spaces they had occupied during their first visit. General Lisa Morgan poured drinks for the assembled group, while Captain Jake Bennett stood by the viewport watching ships from 100 different species come and go from the station's docking ports. Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez sat with Dr. Kevin Walsh, and both of them still looked slightly amazed at what they had accomplished. We actually did it, Maya said, and her voice carried a note of disbelief. We reformed the Galactic Council. 2 years ago, they laughed at us, and now we are writing the rules. Daniel accepted a drink from Lisa and allowed himself a small smile. We had a lot of help. The Halcorians and the Xanathi and all the other species who were tired of being ignored. We just provided the spark that started the fire. It was more than a spark, Kevin said quietly. Humanity proved that the old order could be challenged. We showed that determination and innovation matter more than age or established power. That is what really changed things. Lisa raised her glass, and the others followed suit. To Earth, to humanity. And 2, never backing down when someone tells us we should know our place. They drank, and the moment felt significant in a way that was hard to articulate. Outside the windows, the galaxy stretched away in all directions, filled with species and civilizations that now saw humanity as equals rather than primitives. It had been a hard road, and the costs had been measured in lives and resources and endless months of struggle. But they had prevailed, and in doing so, they had changed the fundamental nature of galactic society. Dr. Nicole Price joined them a few minutes later, still wearing her lab coat and looking exhausted. The weapons developer had become something of a legend in military circles, and several alien species had actually approached her about consulting on their defense systems. She accepted a drink gratefully and collapsed into a chair with a sigh of relief. "How are the new ship designs coming along?" Lisa asked. Beautifully, Nicole replied. We have combined Halcorian shield technology with our railgun systems, and the results are impressive. The prototype is faster and more maneuverable than anything the Krell have, and it hits harder than ships twice its size. We should have a full squadron operational within 6 months. Good, Lisa said. The treaty is wonderful, but we still need to be ready. The Krell have not forgotten what happened, and neither have the other old powers. They will be looking for ways to undermine us. Let them look, Jake said from his position by the window. We have allies now. We have respect. And we have shown that humanity does not give up when things get difficult. That combination makes us stronger than species that have been spacefaring for millennia. Daniel walked to the window and stood beside Jake, looking out at the impossible vastness of space. 2 years ago, we came here desperate and afraid. We begged them to help us, and they mocked us. They told us we were weak and that we should have stayed in our cave, but we proved them wrong. We showed them that humans are survivors. We showed them that we adapt and we innovate and we refuse to accept defeat. Humanity had been dismissed as primitives, but they had risen to challenge the greatest powers in the galaxy. They had taken their weapons that the Council considered crude and barbaric and used them to devastating effect. They had stolen technology and improved upon it. They had formed alliances with species the old powers had ignored, and they had fundamentally reshaped the political landscape of the entire galaxy in less than 2 years. The Treaty of Sol was just the beginning. Human colonies were spreading throughout nearby star systems, and each one was fortified with the same defensive networks that protected Earth. Human ships bearing the distinctive designs that combined multiple alien technologies with human innovation patrolled the borders of their expanding territory, and the Alliance for Equitable Governance continued to grow as more species joined, seeking the protection and partnership that humanity offered. The old powers watched all of this with growing concern, but there was little they could do. Military action had been proven ineffective. Economic sanctions were meaningless when humanity had allies willing to trade. Political isolation was impossible when the humans had become central figures in the reformed council. The galaxy had mocked Earth's plea for help, and humanity had responded by becoming too powerful to ignore. Ambassador Carter turned away from the window and looked at his companions, the people who had stood with him through the darkest moments and who had helped build this new reality. We have accomplished something remarkable, but we cannot become complacent. We cannot forget the lessons we learned. The moment we stop innovating and adapting is the moment we become like them. Old and stagnant and vulnerable to the next species that comes along with new ideas and absolute determination. Agreed, Lisa said. We stay sharp. We stay ready. And we never forget that respect in this galaxy has to be earned and maintained. They raised their glasses one final time as Earth turned far below and the stars shone all around them. The galaxy had tried to put humanity in its place, and humanity had refused to accept that place. They had climbed from the bottom through courage and ingenuity and ruthless efficiency. The age of human expansion had truly begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. They had been mocked, but they had risen, and now they stood as equals among the stars.